Hello and thank you for joining today. Today's webinar is Improving Your Top Line and Bottom Line with E-Commerce. Your presenter is Michael Bird, CEO and Digital Strategist at Spindustry. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the question feature and we'll do our best to answer these at the end of the webinar. You will be receiving an email with the recorded webinar and the slide deck after this. And without further ado, I'll let Michael go ahead and get started.
Great, thanks Brittany. All right, let me see if that's okay. Is that better? Can everybody hear me now? All right, we've got that flip, and now we're going. Okay, let me back up and just hit the agenda again real quick. We're going to define e-commerce today. We're going to provide an overview of the current e-commerce landscape. We're going to outline the proper investment and development and support of an e-commerce platform. We're going to determine your e-commerce opportunity. We'll look at a spreadsheet to help model that. We're going to talk about setting good goals, evaluating objections, and crossing roadblocks surrounding e-commerce. We're going to specifically hit on the objection of your current sales channel reacting to you setting up an e-commerce site and selling direct to consumer. And we're going to outline specific actions you can take in the next 30 days to get started. Again, I'm not sure what you heard or not. So what we did talk about was we've previously covered some e-commerce statistics and introing the e-commerce landscape. And in other webinars, we're certainly going to get more technical, but today's is all about the business of e-commerce. So, all right, looks like everything's working now. All right, great. So what is e-commerce? Let's define that quickly. We have a nice stat here, of course, within 2 years, 70% of B2B companies without e-commerce will be adding it. So let's define it and understand what all these people are adding. So in our terms, selling your services online is e-commerce. E-business is surrounding services where you're interacting with partners online, but you may not be selling something in particular. There might be surrounding services like providing customer service or things like that online, but we don't consider that proper e-commerce. And enterprise e-commerce is really what we spend our time talking to clients about, and many of you deal in, is e-commerce where you might have 50,000 products, parts that have need to be combined and configured in different ways, a complex buying process with a long timeline, perhaps a request for quote, multiple pricing tiers, people that have to log in to get the products. And on the back end, your e-commerce platform is tied into ERP systems, points of sale, et cetera. That's the kind of e-commerce we're really exploring today, and that requires some investment and also then has to have opportunity to balance that. That's the kind of e-commerce we're really covering. So what is the current e-commerce landscape? Again, you'll be getting these slides with all these different statistics. I'm not going to read all of them today, but just a couple to set the stage. 1.9 billion global digital buyers, that's 25% of the world's population interact with e-commerce. But yet, half of American small businesses still do not have a website and an e-commerce platform, so lots of opportunity. 65% of shoppers price compare on mobile phones and physical locations. 3% of e-commerce visits convert into a purchase. We will talk about that there are some things a lot of e-commerce sites need to work on. 69% of shopping carts are abandoned, and lots of times it's surprises in the checkout process, like high shipping costs, that cause people to bail out. So we need to look at that in your e-commerce platform if that's a problem. 52% of online stores, however, have omni-channel capabilities, which means not only are they letting their customers shop via online in an e-commerce platform, but that's integrated with their offline shopping, so you can get a true picture of your account at any point. So that's required some real sophistication for people to look into. A couple more, just that 41% of B2B companies expect B2B sales to grow more than 25%. And for manufacturers, some of whom are on the line today, 5.9%, up from 5.2% of sales are online, which is an interesting number. It's higher than the average of some industries, but still, as you can see, clearly lots of opportunity for growth. And 57% of people, organizations, not just manufacturers, say that e-commerce only accounts for 1 or 2% of sales today. So lots of room for growth. Sometimes people feel like, oh, maybe I've missed the boat. There's lots of time to still jump in, but the time is now. We'll talk about some more of that. So let's talk about what it takes to invest. We'll give you the investment news first, and then we'll talk about all your opportunities. So what does it take to properly invest in e-commerce to get started at the enterprise level we've been discussing? So a couple of different decisions that you have to make when looking at how you might move ahead. Do you have an internal team that can support designing, building, and supporting an e-commerce platform? Or are you working with an external partner, such as an agency or web development firm of some sort? And related to that, of course, is, are you developing a custom platform that might have more upfront costs, but less subscription costs? Or are you subscribing to a package that might be pre-built, give you less options, but might be less expensive to get started with out of the gate? There's a lot, these can be hour-long and day-long conversations we have with clients about the choices here, but those are certainly things you need to consider. And then once you've developed the site, launching the site is sort of still just day one, right? You have to support it in an ongoing fashion after that. So you need to make sure you're investing properly and ongoing in the platform investment, whether that's, again, custom development or subscription to software. And again, the team investment. After the fact, you still need developers, you still need some of those people to technically support the site, but now you're integrating marketing support as well. And that's going to be people and marketing dollars to keep the site running after the fact. So again, you have to look at development, but you have to make sure you can support the site ongoing. And marketing of a website can involve traditional marketing that a lot of you probably use in different ways today, and probably an upstep in digital marketing that you may be doing some of today, but probably need to do more when you look at it, your investment plan in e-commerce as you go ahead. To give you some idea of dollars, different statistics we could pull up, but we've pulled one here that said e-commerce replatforming efforts. So going to a new e-commerce platform can cost large retailers up to $10 million, while mid-market organizations can spend as much as $500,000 to $1 million to get a site up and supported in the first year. And we found that to be true. Another survey conducted by Internet Retailer said that 17% of organizations say they're replatforming right now, even considering those investments. And another 72% say they plan to switch in the next 2 years. So while it's a big investment for some organizations, there's also a big opportunity. And again, you can see that lots of people are already making the decision to invest in e-commerce or going to in the next year or so. And I don't expect you to read this slide or while we're on the webinar today, but I wanted to provide this so we can share it after the fact. What would it look like to have an internal team that can support the development and the marketing of a site after the fact? This outlines the roles, including developers, server support, account management, digital marketing, that you would need on a team, whether that team is internal as employees or external as part of an agency. And if you're talking to an agency who would help you build an e-commerce site, and they don't have people in all these different roles or tell you that 2 people can do all these jobs, I would be cautious about that and just make sure you ask a lot of questions about the complexities that they've handled in the past and that they have all the right team members needed. And in addition to the team members outlined here, note, of course, that people go on vacation, they quit. There's lots of times when you need to double up on resources. So in some of these cases, you need 2 people in these different roles. So it can be quite an investment in staff if you're trying to keep these people on board internally. So investing is good to talk about, but so is the opportunity that makes it worthwhile, right? So let's move on to what the opportunity can look like for you as you move into e-commerce. So we have to set the stage that not all of you are coming from the same place, right? So some of you on the webinar today looking at going on to the e-commerce or going online to sell your products and services, you might not be selling parts or products that you're selling today in any capacity. And in this case, you're really looking at kind of a blue sky situation, or blue ocean situation, where you are inventing a new business. Essentially, you have a lot to figure out, and you have to think about your marketing plan, your costs, your pricing and shipping, and all the different things you may not have modeled at all today. So that's really is, again, changing your business dramatically or starting a new business within maybe an existing organization. And so there's a lot to think about there. If you're selling parts or products through offline channels and partners today, it's good because you have some idea of a business model to work from. If you offline have to talk to 10 people to get one sale completed, or your profit margin is X, Y, or Z %, et cetera, you can make some assumptions that things are going to be similar or different when you go online. And then as you see the reality of e-commerce and online sales happen, you can make adjustments as you go forward. But at least you have something to build off of. But the good thing is you can also take some of the shackles off that might have been there from scalability's perspective when you're working offline. And some of you on the webinar today are already selling parts and products online, but maybe the platform you're using is fairly basic. Maybe it doesn't integrate with other back-end systems. So there's opportunity to both sell more and to reduce costs, which, as the title of the webinar indicates, are two of the goals we want to talk about today. Is how do you make more money on the top line, and how do you save costs on the bottom line to overall increase your margin? So to that point, let's talk about a couple of those things. At the top line, more opportunity. So obviously, excuse me, obviously, if you have not sold online today, or you input a better e-commerce platform, or you just turn the gas on with marketing, selling new orders to new customers, widening your geography, widening the audience type you're reaching out to, just selling more at the top obviously increases revenue. The other thing we see as an opportunity when we talk to a lot of clients is repeat selling and cross-selling to existing customers. So you finally did get somebody to buy from you, but they never come back. Well, maybe if we made them a part of a points program, or we send emails out once in a while, or we reconnect them through Google ads and remarketing, we can get people back to the website. So if you get people to buy more in their cart, or you get them to buy twice a year, 3 times a year, or 3 times a year from you instead of once, obviously you're going to increase that top line revenue. So that's one way to look at growing your e-commerce opportunity. So switching to the bottom line, selling to existing or new customers more directly obviously can help you with costs. So today, if you're selling through dealers, distributors, et cetera, or through retail, and that partner is taking 30%, 40%, 20%, and you can cut that percentage down, then you're selling the same amount of products and the same amount of sales to your end consumers, but you're keeping much more of the money. So your bottom line is much better. Also, reducing costs and handling orders. So we see this a lot with simple e-commerce sites that are up, or again, people handling sales offline. You've got, we know people with organizations that are doing, 5 million in ag parts a year offline, and they have a room full of technical customer service people helping that process get completed. But if they get more customers, they have to hire, more people. So it scales, but it costs money while it scales. So if you can handle those same orders online, where scalability is removed to a great degree, you could reduce those costs and perhaps headcount, or repurpose people to do other more effective jobs. If you're using an e-commerce system where you have to data enter orders into a back-end system, we can potentially remove that cost of having to do that, as well as related to that data entry, correcting mistakes. We see it's not just a mechanical process of retyping an order in from one system to the other. That assumes everything goes correctly. If people make mistakes, that can lead to returns, that can lead to all kinds of different things that lead to people not coming back to shop with you. So you want to reduce, wherever you can, those costs. So if you can increase your top line revenue and reduce some of those costs in the bottom line, ultimately, then you make a lot more money. So let's talk about that. How do you make money on e-commerce and how do you model the system? And again, once you start selling online, how do you look for conversion points where you can improve each of these areas and ultimately then sell more? So I told you we wouldn't get very technical in this webinar, but we're going to get a little bit technical here as we talk about a couple of these terms, but I know you can handle it. So, all right, so when we're modeling e-commerce success for clients, these are some of the points we look at. So most of you are probably familiar with terms such as when you look at your website, you have 20,000 visitors, or some people say sessions or visits. There's all kinds of terms, but you know that there's a certain amount of people that come to your website and e-commerce store once a month, let's say. So that's what we're going to call visitors today. Bounce rate is probably a term that you're not as familiar with. This involves if, say, 10,000 people come to your website within a month. If you have a 60% bounce rate, that means 6,000 of those people immediately leave. Now, we can go into a variety of reasons about why that's true. Either it's search engine bots, or it's people that looked up a name similar to yours and ended up at your site, or for whatever reason, they immediately left. It's something you should look at and try to improve upon. But when you're trying to figure out conversion and how we can improve people that do want to be on your website and make sure they're buying and ultimately you making more money, what you have to look at is with a 60% bounce rate, really only 4,000 of those 10,000 people are going through your website enough to buy anything. So when you're looking at conversion statistics, 4,000 is really your top line, not 10,000, which, while sad in one way that only 4,000 people are perusing your website, it actually makes your conversion statistics go up, because if 400 people bought on your website, then 10% of the 4,000 bought versus like 5% or 4% of 10,000 that you might have thought was your conversion percentage. So some other terms and conversion points where we try to improve how people interact with e-commerce sites is, once you get someone past the bouncing and they're on your website exploring, obviously you want that person to add something to the cart. If they start a cart, you don't want them to abandon it, but we can look at abandoned cart statistics to find out why people aren't completing. The people that do complete the journey through a cart become your order count. That's the number of orders, say, you have in a month. And then for each order, you have an average order value. So for each, if your average order value is $350 and you can get that to be $400, you're dealing with the same amount of people, the same amount of workload, but you're making more per customer, which is great. And then something we always want to remind people is when you're looking at your marketing efforts and whether they're working or not, consider that if the marketing effort never brought that person to your e-commerce site and they never bought that first time, they also would never buy that second, third, and fourth time, which adds up to the lifetime value of that customer. So yes, you made $350 off that customer today, but if you make $3,000 off that customer in the next year, the marketing is really responsible for that total, not just that first order, because they might not have otherwise ever found it. So all good things to consider, and we're going to go to a spreadsheet here in a second and show how all these work in a real model for you. Excuse me. But one thing I want to touch on real quick before we do that is some of those softer conversion points. So all the ones I just described are going to lead to people putting something in their cart and buying from you and you making more money. But when you're thinking about the success of your e-commerce site and also the success of it tomorrow versus today, consider that when you're spending money on marketing, if it leads to any of these secondary conversion points, those are still wins and will lead to sales eventually. So if people are signing up for your email blast, if they're signing up for sending you a contact us form, if they're filling out a request for quote form, which then gets a sale generated, but it's an offline sale, if they're creating an account at least and taking the time to do that, and if they're downloading any brochure or literature from your site, you should certainly, in a model where you're evaluating if your marketing is working, count all of those as wins and either assign them a point value or dollar value or something. So when you're considering what marketing is working, you're giving credit to those things so that, again, they will eventually lead to a sale, and you want to make sure you've got that chain working. And if you shut that marketing off and these things never happened, then the eventual sale may never happen. Okay, so we're going to jump over to an Excel spreadsheet here, show you some numbers. Okay, so everybody seeing the Excel spreadsheet? Yep, okay, I'm getting nods, good. Okay, so again, there's a lot of ways you can look at this, and you all have your own businesses and different ways to model this, but we found it helpful to provide something to get people started in looking at various considerations in e-commerce. So let's walk through this real quick. So if you have, as I mentioned earlier, 20,000 visitors coming to your e-commerce platform a month, then you have a 60% bounce rate. That leaves 40% of 20,000 as people who are actually true visitors to your website and spending more than 30 seconds and more than one page on your website. So of that 8,000, let's say 3% of those turn into true buyers. So we have 240 people have bought something from you at an average cart value of $350. That means in a month you're making $84,000 on your online store top line. And then you multiply that by 12 and you get to your annual revenue of right around $1 million. This next field, again, you could play with this, but this was something we wanted to show of saying, what is the cost reduction here versus your next best sales channel? So let's say it's costing you 40% to sell through retail, and you compute it's only costing you 20% margin to sell online. So your cost savings is 20%, and so you're going to make an additional $200,000 off of the $1 million if you sold the same amount online that you otherwise had to sell through retail. So we thought that was an interesting statistic to look at. And again, we're going to send you the spreadsheet as well as the PowerPoint, so you could change these numbers to fit, but we thought that was a worthwhile number to pit stop on. And this lifetime value that I mentioned earlier, so let's just make an assumption that somebody who spends, $350 with you in one visit is going to spend 5 times that in their lifetime, or say in the next 3 years. And so that would mean the lifetime value of these customers in a year would add up to $5 million eventually generated from whatever efforts it took for you to generate this 20,000 people coming to the site that then led to all of that. So just something to consider as we explained it a second ago. So then trying to line up some costs and the investment and revenue together. So down the left side, and again, this could be all over the map. We've looked at the clients that we serve and some other industry statistics and kind of put an average here, but obviously you could change these as you start into your development process and see what your real numbers are. What we wanted to show here was in the year 1, you're going to have development and software costs of some amount. In this case, we put $400,000. In year 2, your software and your development costs are going to go down, but your marketing costs are going to go up. And in year 3, we just use that same model as well. So over 3 years, we have this fictitious, company investing $850,000 in building and supporting the site for 3 years. And then over on the right, obviously in the first year when you're building the site, you may not have revenue show up. So this is going to be year 2, 3, and 4 revenue. But using the calculations above, we came up with our year 2 top line revenue of the $1 million I showed you a little bit ago. And then through a variety of methods, whether it's people coming back or you doing marketing, et cetera, let's say in the next year, you see your monthly visitor growth 10%, and you see a cart value growth of 20%. And then the year after that, you see it grow again by 10% and 20%, which is realistic numbers. So you're selling $3 million online against the $850,000. So even if you have a profit margin somewhere around 30%, you're still doing pretty well here. And again, these numbers you can change and model on your own, but we thought this gives you all the factors on one spreadsheet you need to start building a business case for how e-commerce might look for you. All right. And again, we'll share that spreadsheet as well as the slide deck. Okay. So having some of those numbers is great, but with any e-commerce project, or frankly, any marketing project, development project, manufacturing project in your business, there's a couple other business realities we want to talk about. One is setting goals and one is dealing with objections, because we all know if these things don't go right, organizations can find money to do what they want to do if everyone's on board. But if everyone's not in alignment on the goals and haven't talked about the objections, things can go awry. So let's talk through some of that. Okay, so with goals, many of you have probably been to various business seminars about goal creation, so I won't dwell on the SMART definition, but coming up with basic goals of we want to sell more or let's increase revenue is a great start, but you have to get those goals to be SMART, meaning they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, so that there are no disagreements. I also suggest reviewing your goals at 1 month, 3 month, 6 month intervals as you go through a year. If you set goals at the start of the year and then don't look at them again till the end of the year and then say, well, did we make it? Again, that's where everybody says, well, I meant this, I meant that. If you gut check those goals at all those different points, making sure they're SMART and making sure no other external situations have changed the goals, then there won't be any argument at the 12-month mark about whether you achieved success or not. So let's just look at a couple of example goals, and I'm going to criticize my own goals as I do this to kind of go through this exercise to help you guys do this. So a 10% increase in sales to new customers in 2020. That sounds pretty good, and it's better than let's get more sales. That said, a 10% increase on sales, based on what? Where did you come up with that number? So again, if you're the blue ocean people we talked about at the start who haven't done this before at all, you got to pick some number out of a hat. I get it. But realize, again, if you review the goal at 1 month, 3 months, et cetera, you might, without making excuses, you might want to rejigger that goal a little bit if it was just a pie in the sky guess in the beginning. Obviously, for those of you that have been selling offline or through other methods, you might be able to come up with a more realistic number of growth you've seen year over year, but make sure it's a real number. And then we say to new customers here, just make sure you have a definition on that. Does that mean someone who's never bought from you, which is what it sounds like, or are you going to allow somebody who hasn't bought from you in 3 years to be considered a new customer? Or an existing customer buying a new service, is that a new customer with an asterisk on it? Just again, you don't want to let people make excuses when they're gut checking goals at the end of the period, whatever it is. So just double check those and make sure they're specific. So let's do another example. 20% of orders coming from Google Ads in 2020. Well, that sounds good, but when you use percentages as a goal, that realize you're fighting with your other marketing methods too. So if somebody's just kicking it at doing email marketing, the percentage of ads coming from Google might go down, even if the Google Ads person is doing a great job. So if you put it more of a dollar figure of, we want to do $300,000 of sales based on Google Ads against the investment we're making in Google Ads, then it doesn't matter what the person doing email marketing is doing in relation to that. It's a separate pocket goal without excuses as an option. So that would be better than the 20%. An average order value up from 200 to 250 by the end of 2020. Okay, so this is the third one. I think I'm getting pretty good at this, right? I think this is a good goal, and it does. It meets a lot of those SMART definitions. But, and we've seen this happen, let's say you guys decide that you really want to push a low-cost product, but the volume is going to be huge, but it's a $50 item. And so people are buying a bunch of orders at $50 price point. And you're really happy about that happening, but it is decreasing your average order value. So using some, 8th grade algebra that we all learned and forgot, and mean and median and all these kind of numbers, you could remove the outliers from that situation. But just, you don't want it to be excuse making, you just want it to be realistic. But just know, again, look at everything when you're setting your goals and make sure they're as tightly constructed as they can, so everybody is fighting towards the same achievement of those goals. All right. So let's say we're on the same page with goals, which is a great step, but now we got to make sure that we're on the same page with moving ahead and nobody's going to be naysaying the project and sabotaging it, et cetera, which we've certainly seen happen from time to time. So I'm going to run through these real quick and then talk about most of them, but I want to make a point here at the end, so I'm going to run through these quickly and then talk about something. So the biggest challenges people face, we pulled this from a 2019 report with B2B Manufacturer 300 report. So 54% of manufacturers listed lack of money as a problem, sure. 24% noted lack of support from top executives, which we've certainly seen. 19% resistance from internal sales and reps. 18% anxiety about competing with Amazon, which is interesting and we'll talk about. 18% problems recruiting personnel. Remember that long list of people I had a few slides back you have to hire if you want to do this? It is, in fact, tough to find all those people and keep them on board. So that is certainly, we understand that one. And 13% said customer reluctance to buying online. So that's the one I really want to focus on. What that really means is 87% said customers would be excited to buy online. 87% did not identify customer reluctance to buying online as a problem. So while all these other things are important, they're all internal struggles essentially, and they don't paint the picture of opportunity. This last one is saying that your customers want to buy online, and that's the really important part. We can work through everything else if this is a real business case we're doing and everybody wants to buy from you online. So let's talk through some of those. Are we doing okay? All right, good. Sorry, we had one more blip on the sound, but everything sounds okay now. So let's talk through these. For the lack of money, look, for some organizations, not having enough money to do the next big thing is always going to be a problem. That said, if everyone at the top is on board with doing something, generally organizations can find the money. So again, I think with the objection language we're going to give you, with some of the statistics we've given you today, with some of the business modeling, if you can prove the business case out as for an e-commerce initiative, your organization can probably find the money. It's just a matter of priorities. And another way to look at the lack of money is, of course, what is this costing you to not move forward and look at e-commerce? 3 years from now, there may not be enough money that you can throw at e-commerce to catch up to what your competitors are doing. So just consider that when everybody is saying they don't have the money to invest in this. And what else are you investing in, again, that you could deprioritize so that you're net, spending the same amount of money, but you're putting money into something new that you haven't tried, being e-commerce. Well, the lack of support from the top, sort of see above, right? If the C-suite is not on board, they're not going to find the money. If they are on board, they're going to find the money. Are they looking at the goal or the tactic, right? The C-suite may have been trying other methods for 50, 100 years at some organizations, and they may not understand everything about e-commerce and what the opportunity looks like. If you can get them to just talk about growth goals and opportunity, and then you worry about the tactic of e-commerce as something to tackle, maybe that would work as a way to discuss it with them. But, when we do see some, senior leadership that hasn't grown up with the internet, and maybe personally they don't shop online as much, we do see doubt, coming through as we talk with different organizations about their strategy. So you just have to, what I would do is I wouldn't shy away from it. I would keep those doubters involved in the conversations. It's going to rear its head that the people at the top said, see, I told you so, if it doesn't work someday. So the better approach is to keep them involved. Don't let them come to meeting number 1 and then meeting number 12. Keep them involved throughout the process. Maybe not every little nitty-gritty technical meeting, but keep leadership involved in your e-commerce initiative so they understand the complexities. They also understand the opportunity. And again, you don't get the I told you so afterwards when they didn't come to many meetings. So we've certainly seen that happen. Competing with Amazon is an interesting objection. Spoiler alert, Amazon's not going anywhere. So a couple of different options here. You can put your head in the sand and just say, well, we're scared to compete with Amazon or something, so we're just going to keep doing it the way we're doing it. I don't think that's a solution. You could partner with Amazon and sell through Amazon, and we might suggest that as a strategy alongside having your own e-commerce store, and that may work. But really, in that case, you're just trading one partner for another. You're going to be giving away a percentage of your sales to Amazon, just like you're giving it away to retailers or other dealers or distributors today. So ideally, that's not the plan we want to go ahead with, but it is something to pay attention to. The other thing is having your own store is certainly important for a variety of reasons. If you have your own brand store, your own organization store that you can control, you can do some things that aren't going to work well in traditional and shared shopping platforms. So you can offer exclusive products that are only available through your online store. You can offer personalization services on the products or private labeling that, again, like an Amazon or some of those others, isn't going to want to mess with for you. You could offer subscriptions to services. If you sell printers or you sell, printer ink, et cetera, you could allow people to sign up for a subscription so that comes to you ongoing. And related to that, you could have your own points program so people get points every time they buy from you. So again, there's lots of things I buy personally and professionally that we would buy from someone else randomly, but we have points or pricing tiers, et cetera, at one location. So we go back to that same place and keep our purchases collected. So all those are good reasons to have your own store. Again, it might ride alongside selling on eBay or selling on Amazon, but I wouldn't let the existence of Amazon or those channels kind of put you in a deer in headlights situation and not think that you can sell your own products on your own store. And then the last one, of course, is that customer reluctance. We identified on the last slide, it's only 13%, and that just paints 87% of opportunities. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time overly concerned that your customers are unwilling to buy online. I think 5 years ago, maybe that argument held a little bit of water, but I think in our own personal behavior and professional behavior, we've all seen people's willingness to go online to get things done, and frankly, a preference to doing business online. So I don't think that's worth a lot of time to discuss. What is worth time discussing, however, is your current sales channel. So of all the things we just talked about on the last slide, this is the objection we really hear the most when we start talking to a manufacturer about their products, if they're working with a dealer, dealer channel, a distributor network, et cetera, or retail partners, is how are those people, those organizations going to react when I start selling direct to my consumers online? So, it's worth talking about what are they really concerned about. Well, obviously they're concerned about being replaced in competition from an online store. They might try to tell you that the end customers, need that personal interaction and don't want to buy online. We've seen from the previous slide in the survey that's probably not the case. And lots of times it's just the good old fear of change and that things are going to be different and how's this going to look and all of those things. And so those are all worth talking about so you understand what the real objection is. And then what do you believe and what does your leadership believe? Are they backing up what the sales channel people are saying, or are they ready to go even if the sales channel is scared? You need to identify that to know what objection you're really pushing back on. And you need to ask yourself in your organization, okay, that's all true. We all are worried about it. We want to stay with our sales channel. We're afraid of e-commerce. Okay, but what do you think your world and the world will look like at large in another 5 years? I think we can all believe that, okay, 5 years ago, not as many people were ready to make the leap. And I think we would probably all say that 5 years from now, we can imagine, and the statistics back it up, that more and more people will have made the leap to e-commerce. So the longer you wait, the more opportunity you miss and your competition gets ahead of you. So if you're going to go there eventually, why not today? And so that just leads to some conversations you have to have with your current sales channel. And, the more transparent the conversation, probably the better. But let me talk through some scenarios we've seen people take for good, bad, and ugly when they're trying to address this and deciding on how transparent they want to be. So these are real conversations we've had over the years, and I think it's worth sharing these to get, because some of the same ideas may come up when you start thinking about this. So, a separate company website. So you're a manufacturer, you sell through dealer channels. What if we just became our own dealer? What if we put up a direct-to-consumer site under a different brand? We have certainly seen people do that. In some cases it's succeeded, in some people it hasn't. I think you're kidding yourself in this day and age if you believe that nobody's going to find out that's what you're doing. So ultimately you need to be prepared to answer the question of, when somebody asks, why you're doing that and how you're competing with them. You ultimately need to be prepared to answer the question anyway, which begs the question, why not be more transparent and just put up a direct-to-consumer channel under your current brand and just have the hard conversation up front. That's probably our advice, but it's worth noting some people take that approach. The halfway jump off the bridge approach, which you can't halfway jump off a bridge, but we see people do it all the time, right? We see people, I'm okay with baby steps. We've seen people dabble with putting some elements on their website that speak to consumers, but clearly the website is still aimed at their dealer partners. And so it kind of does the worst case version of scaring off the new people you're trying to entice while just maybe freaking out the dealers that you're taking baby steps as well. Again, if you haven't had those hard conversations. So we see, if there's a pro and a con list to starting to communicate with your end consumer on your e-commerce site, you want to make sure you're getting the pros and not just the cons. So again, if you, for example, were honest with your dealer channel, said you were doing this, but put some walls up and said, but we're still going to sell through dealers, but we're just providing help documentation or installation instructions to consumers in our consumer corner or something like that. That makes sense. If you're going to allow consumers and dealers to sign up for email subscriptions that give different content to those two groups and being honest about it, that would be a good step. But again, kind of having consumers show up at your site thinking they can buy and then they can't can lead to difficulty. And then also just, taking baby steps, allowing consumers on the site but not fully embracing it can just lead to a jumbled mess. You don't want to go halfway if you can help it. But there could be baby steps, and we'll talk about that. The money for nothing approach, we've heard people talk about this of, okay, so let's say you're going to talk to your dealers or distributors and say, yep, we're going to sell direct to consumer. But, if you're our dealer in Alabama and we sell to somebody direct from the website, the e-commerce shop in Alabama, we're still going to give you a piece of the action for doing nothing. Now, maybe instead of getting their 20% commission, the dealer only gets a 10% commission, but they still get the name of the end consumer and they're allowed to do the installation or the service. I think that's a good bridge to facing the eventuality that you're going to deal with customers directly, but it still gives the dealer a role and still lets them collect some commission along the line. But again, it starts addressing the eventuality that unless that dealer finds a role to play other than a middleman, that they might be replaced. But it's a softer way to do it. We've seen people have success taking that approach and communicating this change. Another thing that goes forgotten sometimes is customer insight sharing. So once you put up a website and deal directly with your end consumer, you as the manufacturer are going to get a lot more questions. You're going to see people searching on your website and hopefully collecting that search data, so you know what end consumers are looking for and what language and what voice of customer they're using when they do those searches. You're going to know what pages they go to most, and you're going to know what they put in the cart. You're going to know what they abandoned in their cart. All of this information can be shared with your dealer channel, and some of it could affect how they talk to their consumers in person that they're still talking to. It could affect signage they have in their stores. It could affect different things they do in their presentation they're not doing today. So you could see it again as another positive and something in the pro column of you communicating and recapturing your direct relationship with your end consumer. So, and again, backing up 100 years here, of course, you know, if things had been different, I think most of you as organizations and manufacturers would never have wanted to give up communication with your end consumers to an intermediate partner. We did that to deal with scalability. The internet has removed some of the scalability problems, and there may be good reasons to have dealers and such still involved, but let's make sure, let's re-examine those reasons and make sure, just like the employees that don't need to do data entry we talked about 10 slides ago, if you can connect your e-commerce store to your backend system, let's find other things for those people to do that make sense and use them for the best services they can use to complete the cycle of selling and supporting the end consumer ultimately between all the parties. Another thing we've seen, and statistics will back this up, that you as a brand and you as a manufacturer, if you're dumping money into marketing to build your brand and selling directly to consumer, that rising tide actually in building up the brand so much helps the dealer channel. And here's how that works, right? So yes, you're taking 20% or 30% or some percent of the market who's now going to buy online directly from you. And let's say some percent is still buying through the dealer channel for whatever reason. But if that overall size of the pie has grown because of the marketing and promotion you've done to drive people to your e-commerce site, then their ultimate dollars may not be that different. So something to think about, that building the brand is good for all involved. So a lot of big concepts there and a lot of things that are going to take longer than 30 days for you to implement. But that said, we like to leave webinars with something you can do tomorrow, and a conversation starter at least that you can take back to your organization and do something with. So we have a book out called Run, Grow, Transform, A Manufacturer's Guide to Digital Marketing. And in that book, we cover different topics in each chapter. And at the end of that chapter, like I said, we have something for you to go do in the next 30 days. So I want to give you one of those based on what we've talked about, here today as well. So if you go and look at your own website, whether it's e-commerce or not, and then you go and look at two of your competitor sites, I want you to think about, especially if your site is aimed at your dealer channel or just a general branding site, and it's really not in the business of connecting with your end consumer. What is the end consumer who happens across your site seeing, and are there any confusion points? Again, are they seeing an invitation to get involved? Is there a consumer corner? If they're having trouble with their product, can they get help from you, or are they easily connected with their dealer somehow? Is there a find a dealer button if they can't buy from you directly? And obviously, if they can, are all the shopping steps clear? But just ask yourself, if you haven't worried much about what the end consumer does when they come to your website because you're selling through partners, I think it's unrealistic to assume that your end consumers don't stop by. So think about what they're seeing when they get there. And again, what are 2 baby steps you could take if what the consumer sees today is not what they should see tomorrow? And I want you to think about the halfway jump off the bridge kind of idea I mentioned earlier. You got, think it through. Baby steps are okay. Just make sure, we're not leading them down a dead end path, or that it's not a half measure that doesn't work well. So, but again, some of the things I just said, if there isn't a find a dealer button, if there isn't a help button, if there isn't a warranty card registration, if there isn't something like that that lets them communicate with you and look, wanted when they visit there, that you are happy they stopped by at least in some way, or at least explain to them that they can't buy here and here's how they can find your products. Just make sure that if you haven't thought about your site from that consumer's perspective and from an e-commerce perspective, that there's something there for them to grab onto. So, in review, hopefully we've shown you today that e-commerce is a great opportunity. There's lots of stats, and again, we'll share this deck that you can find more of those yourself as well. But I think e-commerce has certainly started, it's matured, but it's not too late. There's lots of opportunity. There are unknowns, but you can model your business online. We've given you a spreadsheet to start that modeling. You may have your own modeling tools as well, and hopefully some of the terms and conversion points and data elements we've given you today will help you think that through. E-commerce does require a significant investment and an ongoing investment, and one that does not end at launch day. So it's certainly something to think about. I would model a 3-year plan. I think getting much beyond that is unrealistic, and the world's going to change. Then, especially if you're, like we said, if this is the first time you're selling the products or services you're selling, and you're really guessing in some cases, don't model much further than that. But I think a 2 to 3 year model is probably a good idea. Set those SMART goals accordingly. We gave you some examples of those that meet the SMART definition, and also how to question those goals to make sure they're really good. And I do advise, as I said earlier, checking those goals at the 1 month mark, 3 month mark, 6 month mark. So if you do need to refine them, you're not arguing about them at the finish line at the end of the year. Be ready for objections and work together on answers with executive support. Hopefully, again, these are big topics. We could talk for hours about each of these, but we hopefully gave you some talking points and stories about things we've run into that will help you at least frame the conversation correctly around some of those objections. And your current sales channel will always be uncomfortable with change, will always, especially if it looks threatening to them personally. So again, we put a spotlight on that objection today. So again, hopefully we started with some right questions, gave you some ideas, talked about some scenarios that we've seen organizations work through, and happy to talk to any of you about those experiences. But hopefully some of those will help in a meeting where everybody's staring at each other trying to figure out what to do. Some of these will start a conversation you might not have otherwise had. So hopefully that was helpful. And just again, with all of e-commerce, we always want to end with saying, we want you to get excited about kind of the low risk for big reward model of e-commerce. I mentioned 100 years ago, you might not have gone into using a sales channel if you didn't have to. Lots of people spend money on, trade shows they've gone to every year for years and kind of seen diminishing returns. Relatively, the amount of investment you're going to put in e-commerce for the opportunity to really expand your business and the opportunity potentially to change your business and sell direct to consumer where you haven't been in the past, or expand geographically in the way you haven't in the past, sell products via subscription or some other way that you haven't before. The risk reward model is so much cooler and so much more to your advantage than it has been in different industrial states in the past 50, 100 years. I want you to get excited and think about this. Treat it like a big investment that it is, but man, the opportunity is even bigger. So, dream big, think about your business, think about how you could transform it for tomorrow. And, websites in general and e-commerce platforms allow you to do that in ways that other techniques never did. So get excited about that, and we would be happy to talk to any about how to make that happen. With that, I don't know if we have any questions today. I've got one. We can go through, see if there's any other questions from anyone, and otherwise we can wrap up and get you some contact information. Okay, yeah, there's one on the see, I told you the one technical thing I did. So the bounce rate, real quickly, I'll just mention that again. I had one person ask about that, just to be clear. So as we talked about, if you have 10,000 people a month come to your website and you have a 60% bounce rate, that would mean 6,000 essentially leave immediately. And again, we could have a whole nother webinar on how to try to reduce that bounce rate. But the important part for the business side of this is that means you have 4,000 people as real shoppers, okay? They got into the store. So when you're thinking about how many people bought, it's a percentage of that. So if 4,000 people were shopping and 400 bought, you had a 10% conversion rate, where again, if you were using the 10,000 number, you would think only 3% or so were buying from you, and that might make you kind of sad. But at 10%, your conversion is working really well. What that means is it changes your strategy. So if conversion's working well and you just need more people showing up to the website, now you spend more money on marketing and such to get more people to the website. If your conversion was off, then you're looking at what's wrong with the shopping cart and the flow of the website and that kind of thing and trying to fix that. So anyway, that's the definition of bounce rate, and that's why it's important to, just like looking at abandoned carts, just like looking at average cart value, you want to make sure that you're looking at the right conversion step and solving the right problem. You know, we see people throwing money at the wrong step lots of times, and that can lead to trouble. We talked about on the last webinar, we talked about an example where a client we know very well has had a customer or a person we were talking to. Actually, they're not one of our clients. So they had 1,000 people starting a shopping cart and only something like 10 completing it, and they were asking questions about how to get more people to the website. So we actually did back up and talk to them about looking at this a different way, and are focused on what is wrong with their shopping cart in that conversion step, and made sure they were not pouring more money on getting people to the website yet until that has been addressed. And so hopefully we'll get to keep talking to them and figure out that whole journey. But we want to, those are real examples where people have put money in the wrong conversion step. We want to make sure that does not happen. So good question. Okay, so contact information. There's my name again, Michael Bird, my email address. I got 2 Twitter handles there. One is more business oriented. One also will have e-commerce statistics, but might have some Star Wars and comic book news as well if you're interested in that kind of thing. But certainly follow either of those that you wish. And thank you very much for your time today. I love talking about this stuff. We have more webinars coming up that are going to go in a little more technical direction, talking about search and other elements on e-commerce sites. But hopefully some of the business topics today helped you make decisions about your e-commerce initiatives.
All right, thank you everyone for joining today. As a reminder, you'll be receiving an email with the recording, the slide deck, and that spreadsheet that Michael shared earlier. And as always, reach out with any questions you have, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.